Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the premiere episode of The Devil's Due. I am your host, Carl Duty, and with me for the first time and hopefully many times to come is my co-host, Mr. Drew Celestino. Drew!
Oh, hi.
We're here.
We are here.
We're doing it.
You're optimistic.
I am very optimistic. This is going to be a blast.
All right. I'm happy you're happy.
And I'm happy that you have a smile on your face, possibly hiding some anger over early technical difficulties.
Well, for those of you who don't, know how a podcast works, it's pretty simple, but if you want it to sound reasonably decent, you need some equipment and toys and stuff, and unfortunately, I kind of put all my podcasting stuff in a drawer after my last podcast ended, so I had to dig it out and put it all back together again. And here it is.
That's okay. We're doing a good job so far. I think we sound silky smooth on the microphone.
Silky smooth.
Silky. So nice. Okay, so this is our first episode. We are very excited about this show. We're glad that you've decided to give us a shot and listen to us. Of all the podcasts out there you have to choose from. The show is called The Devil's Due, and if you have seen our Facebook page at facebook.com/DevilsDuePod, or you can follow us on Twitter at Devil's Due Pod. Also, we have email.
Do people use email anymore?
No.
Okay.
But we have it. You never know. One day, if this show catches on, sponsors might want to get in contact with us. You never know.
Oh, you're so wide-eyed and bushy-tailed right now.
So optimistic. Give it
good.
Get it halfway through our first season before my feelings get crushed. Let me have my blind optimism. Our email is thedevilsdue@gmail.com. So if you want to reach us out, you can follow us on any of those social media formats. For our first episode, we're going to keep it kind of basic, straightforward. We're going to give you some backgrounds to ourselves, how we came to know the character Daredevil, and then we're going to launch into the first episode of the Netflix Daredevil show.
So you're saying this show is about Daredevil?
This show itself, yes. Mainly about Daredevil. We are children of geek culture, so we're going to be doing some other stuff here and there. But for this show right now, we're just going to kind of keep it bare bones to give you a nice introduction to us and introduction to the show. In the future, we'll be doing different things. We're going to try out different segments on the show. Some episodes we've discussed, we're going to do episode commentaries in which you can just watch the episode and turn the volume down and kind of follow along with us as we just commentate the episode.
For the big ones, the good ones.
For the big ones.
Yeah, the landmark ones.
Most episodes, though, we will just be doing a basic discussion on it. So, and if you agree with what we're discussing, or if you don't agree and you have our opinions, by all means, feel free to shoot us those at those resources that we mentioned earlier, the Twitter page, the Facebook page. We'll be checking those. Might even check the email once in a while.
Once in a great while.
In
my experience, once a month, you're pretty good.
Yeah, pretty much. So, Drew.
Yes, sir.
You are, as far as Daredevil goes, you are a much more established fan than I am. You've been with the Guardian of Hell's Kitchen as a fan longer than I have. Tell the listeners, how did you discover the character? How did you come to know the character?
Well, okay, so we have to kind of place things into a perspective, right? So I am going to be 34. That's painful to say, but whatever.
Yeah. Oh, I feel so sorry for you as
You're in the ballpark.
39.
You're fine. See, it's a good 5-year swing. It's all good.
We've got our rocking chairs, we've got our lawns, and we want the kids to stay off.
Exactly. Get off of my lawn, please. In any case, so it puts me into a time frame where my introduction to Daredevil would have been the late 80s, I would say early 90s. But at that time, I didn't really care too much about the character. So he looked cool, and that's about all I knew. So I had the Marvel trading cards. I think that might have been a lot of people's introduction to a lot of Marvel characters of my generation, to be honest with you. Not the comics themselves, the cards.
Yeah.
But one drove the other, so it's all good. I don't remember a ton from the first series of I have them, but I'm saying Daredevil specifically. The first series of cards, I wasn't too impressed with Daredevil. Series 2, with the John Romita Jr. art on the trading card, that one was very striking to me, and I thought he looked really cool. But that still wasn't enough to necessarily get me to read Daredevil on any sort of regularity. I still didn't understand what the character was about and the whole street level thing, the Hell's Kitchen thing. These concepts to a 10-year-old are kind of nebulous, So, but the trading card looked really cool. And I was an HBO in the 90s kid, and on HBO in the 90s, there was a lot of fine programming, especially late at night when you're a young lad. But in any case, there was also a show. It was like one of those like cautionary tale kind of shows, and it was called like what was it called? I want to say Families in Crisis or something like that. And it was like true stories about
one of their docudramas.
Yeah, little half-hour
Okay.
docudramas,
Yeah.
right? Ben Affleck was in one, by the way.
Oh,
Just bringing it all.
connections.
Oh my God! This just dawned on me now. That show has two, not one, but two Daredevil connections, and I bet we could find more if we really dug. But okay, so on this HBO program, one of the episodes was about a kid, the Joey DiPaolo story. I'll never forget it. He was a kid in the '80s who got AIDS from a blood transfusion when he was a kid.
I remember that. Yeah.
Now, pretty heavy stuff. They showed this on HBO all the time, though. It was like on repeat. In
It was
the 90s.
before they had that real catalog of
Movies
stuff
and
that they could just
and
dive
Game
into.
of Thrones was not even a glimmer
Of course
in anyone's eye. Anyway, that kid in the show, his favorite character, bar none, was Daredevil, to the point where like they had a scene in the show where they opened up the pack of the Marvel cards and they had the Daredevil. They got the card and they were all excited about it. And Daredevil was like the kid's favorite superhero. And that was kind of like Daredevil, the man without fear. They said it like the man without fear. It was like, oh, okay, cool. So that was kind of like my initial impression of Daredevil for a long, long time. Then I remember when he, in the 90s, as was the style at the time, everyone got a new and edgy costume.
Ah, yes.
Daredevil was not excused from this.
Nope.
He got the armored costume, the black and red one, which ironically, if you kind of look back on it, was ahead of its time.
Yeah.
If now we have the show, but
Yeah.
in any
It's
case,
like if you take away, and this is just a slight quick rabbit trail, if you take away his traditional costume design, the armor costume is not a super horrible design.
compared to what other characters at the time were going
Yeah.
through with costumes, Daredevil, his was one of the better ones, I will say, honestly.
Yeah. Like if you take off the armor shoulder pads,
Sure.
it's a pretty solid costume.
Right. But again, as a kid, I didn't know much. So it was like, whatever, I think it looks okay. I don't know. What are people mad? Well, people were mad because that look for that character didn't make any sense. He wasn't this like armored up superhero. He was a street level vigilante. And again, it was one of those things that I didn't really appreciate then. So fast forward many years, and I didn't think too much of Daredevil until somewhere in the early 2000s when I heard nothing but great things about this legendary run happening on the book by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev. So I dove in headlong around that era. I don't remember what arc it was that really sunk me in, but once I got in, I was in. And
Yeah.
Daredevil and I, since that point,
You've been good.
He's my boy.
You've been
Daredevil
friends.
is my absolute favorite character in the Marvel Universe. The whole street level thing is those tales are cooler to me and more relatable than
Yeah.
the big grandiose superheroing and avenging and whatnot.
We're going to go deep into the concept of the street level versus the super hero.
Sure,
on our
sure.
next episode.
Okay, all right.
Because that episode 2 of first season is when you really get an appreciation for the street level
Yeah.
hero.
I mean, that's not the only reason I like the character. I mean, there's a lot of things I like about the character, but like he is largely a regular dude, and except for the senses and all that. Sure, obviously, but he's not super strong. He doesn't heal fast. He gets his ass handed to him a lot. And more so than that, he makes a lot of bad decisions. Like,
He really does.
in the show, they haven't quite gotten there yet, but in the comics, man, he makes bad choices a lot. And a lot of the drama of the book is seeing how those play out and how he fixes himself after things go wrong. And I don't know, to me that's interesting. It's more interesting than, a guy who has no problems at all. Like, not your favorite character, for instance, Spider-Man. Now, Spidey, his reputation is that of the hard luck loser, but when you really break him down, it's like, dude, you're you get some pretty fly chicks. You're working pretty steady.
Yeah.
All things considered, dude, you're doing okay.
Especially now.
Yeah.
What he's doing in the comic books now.
Anyway, that's my me and Daredevil have been tight ever since, with some limited deviations in that time frame, but I don't blame the character. I blame some editorially driven poor arcs and writers for that. But that's a blip on the radar in the last 15 years of the character's history, in my opinion.
Awesome. Before I get into my origins with the character, just some background. Obviously, if you're listening to this show, you're either interested in or have already watched and maybe be rewatching with us the Daredevil Netflix series, and that may be your first introduction to the character. As we know, we're kind of living in a new golden age now of comic knowledge being in the mainstream with the Marvel films, and not just the Marvel films, just kind of everything geek culture is.
People are jacked for Suicide Squad, dude. If you would have told me that 5 years ago, I would have called you a liar, much less 10 years ago.
If you would have said that we're going to have a Suicide Squad movie, I've been like, no.
I still don't care, but I know people are excited about it, and it's pretty wild to see.
It looks better than...
leave that on another show. Yeah. That's fine.
So just to give you, the listener, a quick background, if you're not familiar with the character from where he comes from, Daredevil is part of the Marvel Big Bang genesis of the Marvel age back in the mid 60s. Daredevil was
Were you alive back then?
I was not.
Oh, okay.
Stop. I'll take my hearing aid out and whip it at you.
Goddamn.
Daredevil was co-created by Bill Everett and Marvel legend Stan Lee, with a little bit of Kirby mixed in.
Mm-hmm.
Daredevil #1 premiered in April of 1964, and as many of us know, he did not premiere in the traditional red outfit. He was in a brown and yellow outfit.
Yeah.
Which lasted till issue 7, I believe.
Not super long.
Yeah, did not last long, and like so many Marvel color changes early in the day, was simply done on convenience because of either one color ink ran out, or they just said, it looks better like this, go ahead and do it. Well,
that, and the old joke goes, his original costume looked like it was designed by a blind guy.
Yeah, there you go.
So
as far as my origin with character goes, it goes back actually to the movie, the original Daredevil movie. Yeah. I was a comic reader, of course, at the time. As you mentioned, my favorite character being Spider-Man. Given that time, I was probably reading predominantly Marvel books. So I knew of Daredevil. He was on my radar, so to speak. But I didn't know, I knew his name was Matt Murdock. I knew I knew the basics. Like you said, that Marvel card stat sheet basics is what I knew. Then they announced they're doing the movie, and I'm interested to go see the movie, but I decided I want to learn a little bit about the character before I see the movie. So I ended up picking up the trade of Guardian Devil, which was
Kevin Smith.
The Kevin Smith, Joe Quesada landmark run. That was the first Marvel Knights series.
That was the book that saved Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
Very literally. We'll get into that later.
Did Kevin Smith do Daredevil first and then Green Arrow?
That is correct.
Okay, so this book, which normally wouldn't get a lot of coverage within the normal comics world, gets mainstream media coverage because you have a film director, Kevin Smith, coming to write a comic book, which at the time was unheard of. So this book comes out, and it's a landmark run, and it's a couple years later that the movie's coming out. So I decided to go pick up the trade, and I read the trade, and it is fantastic. Guardian Devil is probably one of I would put it in the probably top 5 Daredevil story arcs. Definitely one of the key ones you want to read if you want to get to know the character. Saying that, though, I want to caution you, dear listener, there are some things that happen in the Guardian Devil storyline that most likely at some point will happen in the television show that have not happened yet. So if you want to avoid spoilers, you may want to hold off. But that aside, I read Guardian Devil, loved it. I saw the Daredevil movie, and my initial reaction to it was that I liked it, only because when you compare it to what was out at the time, a lot of times with a lot of comic book movies that happened prior to 2008, I don't think it's always fair to compare it to what has come since 2008. Because that's just on a whole nother level. So I compared the original Daredevil movie to what was out at the time. And I think at the time, while not a outrageously fantastic movie,
No.
and completely understandable why it did not get a sequel, it is definitely not the worst movie that was out there at the time.
No, we could probably do an episode
we'll
about that movie. I have a lot of thoughts on it. Some
Yeah.
positive, some not so positive.
Yeah,
but
we'll definitely hit that on a future episode. But I became more aware of the character. I started reading Daredevil Monthly on the beginning of the Mark Waid run.
it's a good run.
It's a very good run. I enjoyed it a lot and still reading it to this day. And then, of course, the television series came out and just, wow.
Yeah. Now,
Let's do a quick
So-
quick like recap of how the television series came into being.
well, okay, so
Just like
Marvel
Cliff's Notes version.
Marvel recovered the rights to. Okay, so
Let's go back a
hang
little
on.
further. Let's go
Here
to
we
like early 2000s. Marvel
Well-
is in dire financial.
late 90s, the late 90s more
Yeah.
so. And then when Kevin Smith came on board to do Guardian Devil, Marvel had ceded control over a few properties: The Punisher, Daredevil, Black Panther, couple others. Like off the top of my head, I can't think of them.
Rider,
Ghost Rider, you're
Blade.
correct, yeah. And they said, you know what? We don't know what to do with these exactly. And they gave control of those books over to Joe Quesada's company at the time. I can't remember the name of it, but it was his company. And they said, here, do something with this. You're in charge. Put it together. So Joe Quesada got Kevin Smith to jump on and do Daredevil. He got unfortunately there was not Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon did not immediately jump onto the Punisher. There was a very ill thought out arc before it.
Was that Frankencastle?
No, it was comparable though. Frank was an avenging angel.
I remember that.
But in any
Or I
case,
should say I struggle not to remember that.
yeah, we all do. Anyway, so Quesada put together these teams on these books, and they did really, really well. Now, Kevin Smith obviously brought a lot of star power and spotlight on the Marvel Knights line, and the Daredevil book was like the flagship book of the line. The Black Panther run was actually like pretty big too, and to this day, I think it's still renowned as like
That had John Romita Jr. on it.
no.
Or
You're
was
thinking
that the
that was
one
later.
after that?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was a Christopher Priest run, the Marvel Knights run, I believe. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure it was the Christopher Priest run. It was a Marvel Knights thing, and to this day, a lot of people still hold that up as being great. So Marvel Knights was a really big deal. Marvel Knights and the success of the line. I'm not even exaggerating when I say it brought Marvel out of bankruptcy. Well, the movie rights did too, but
Well, the movie rights kind of kept them afloat because what kind of preceded this was that
they sold off Spidey's rights, they sold off
they
the X-Men,
optioned everything.
yeah, and
Just
including
to-
Daredevil.
Yeah, just to keep. They optioned the film rights to the majority of their characters to whoever wanted to pay for them, just to keep a company afloat.
So part of that was, like I said, Spider-Man, who to this day is still, I mean, even though he's back home at Marvel now, Sony still technically has the rights to Spider-Man in perpetuity, although they got smart and they buddied up with Marvel again
Yeah.
to make it good. The X-Men are over in Foxland, and Daredevil was also at Foxland. And after the success of the first Spider-Man flick, they put Daredevil into production, and that's how that movie came about. Didn't do so well. So
Didn't bomb, but didn't perform to expectation.
correct. And there it sat for a long, long time. And the way these contracts work out with Marvel and the studios, except for Spider-Man and the X-Men, well, I'm pretty sure they all work this way, actually. As long as the studios have a movie in a stage of development, they maintain the rights, and Marvel can't do anything with it. So Daredevil came out, underperformed, and it sat.
Yeah.
And it literally just sat. Now, there was probably some pitches happening somewhere in there for a good number of years anyway, until one day I remember reading the headline or the article, like by the way, and it was kind of sly, if I remember. Like, it wasn't a big press release. Someone just like kind of said, "Hey, just so you know, this happened. Marvel and Fox's deal. Marvel got the rights back to like Ghost Rider, Daredevil, the Punisher.
It was big 4 characters that Fox had outside of X-Men: Daredevil, Ghost Rider, Punisher, and Blade.
Yep, and they all just quietly reverted back, and there it stood. Now, what also happened in that time period is Marvel Studios blew up big.
We're at post 2008 Iron Man 1.
Correct. Now, the thing with this, so you got to follow along with the timeline here. And again, like we said about the movie rights, Marvel had no access to make profitable films or controlling the making of the films of Spider-Man and the X-Men. They're big. Yeah. They're big 2 cash cows. Dude, in the 80s and the 90s, Spider-Man and the X-Men were Marvel. Okay, the Marvel
Spider-Man
Comics were Spider-Man and X-Men
by Todd McFarlane, and then a couple months afterwards, you had X-Men #1 by Jim Lee,
and Chris
I believe they're still the 1 and 2
best-selling comics ever
of all time.
So you're talking Marvel's flagship stuff, and they couldn't translate it to cinema the way they wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So what did they do? What did they decide to do? They decided to make their own movies. And they couldn't use their flagship characters. And not for nothing, but someone out there who does read the comics is going to yell at me, but like at the time in the 90s and the 2000s, the Avengers, Captain America, Iron Man, these were not great books. No. They just weren't. I'm sorry to,
They were B characters.
B if not C, honestly.
Yeah.
The Marvel Knights stuff was really leading the way. So as Marvel Knights went, the Ultimate line also came out, and those 2 lines of comics really influenced Marvel Studios. So the movies you see are kind of born from those 2 lines.
Yeah.
But they integrated them. They started out as being very different, but they eventually kind of migrate. Their tone and their beats just became the Marvel style, period, for the whole entire Marvel Comics line, and those lines are now gone. So now it's just all Marvel. But anyway, sorry. Can you tell I've been reading Marvel Comics for a long time? So
never
Marvel,
apologize for passion, amigos. What fuels this show.
So you're getting a history lesson. So Marvel Studios, Iron Man, boom, takes off huge. And we know we're building towards the Avengers.
Yeah.
So, but then Daredevil is still lingering somewhere. And we're, and then you see these movies. You see Iron Man and Captain America and Thor, and they're very big, very global and universal and galactic in scale, building to that anyway. So as a Daredevil fan, I'm thinking, well, Marvel could do a movie if they wanted to, but seeing the tapestry that Marvel's building on the screen here, I don't know where the heck that would fit.
Yeah, because the Marvel films, in contrast to a lot of other comic book movies, and I think this services the Marvel movies very well, there's a sense of joy. They are bright. They are colorful,
and they get dark when they have to.
They do. They treat the characters and the content with a seriousness that is required to tell a good story. But unlike what we've seen out of DC, which is
the Murderverse,
yeah, it's darker, it's moodier. You don't have that sense of joy that you do in the Marvel films. And like you're saying, Daredevil doesn't quite fit that bright, cheerful mold.
No, and even the Mark Waid series that got you into the character, it's that, to me, that was jarring in a way, because that was that was significantly brighter
shift in tone.
But even with that shift in tone, it still was there were undercurrents that were still pretty steeped in heavy human drama and street level stuff. So Marvel then decides at a certain point, a few years ago, I guess, right? Going on 3-4 years ago, hey, we're going to make our own TV shows. No, not Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We're going to do something different than Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We're going to do a Netflix exclusive series. And from when they announced what they were going to be, it was very clear that they were going to be essentially Marvel Knights series, TV shows, street level, gritty shows.
They came out and said, we're doing Daredevil, we're doing Luke Cage, we're doing Jessica Jones, we're doing Iron Fist, and then we're bringing them all together for the Defenders.
That is correct.
And then everybody just went, subscribe to Netflix.
Yep, basically that. Because by this point, Marvel had built up the cachet with the movies, where anything they touch at this point turns to gold. So,
But at the same time, I remember that because at this point, after they had made the announcement, like you and I already knew each other at that point. We were discussing like there was, even though it was kind of before that Marvel can do no wrong. I know there are a couple of my friends out there who are kind of rolling their eyes at that, but
it's true. Sorry.
Deal with it. So we were kind of concerned that, like, are they going to overpolish it? Are they going to make it that lighter tone? And then, like, we get casting news and we're like, okay, that seems to make sense. And then we start to get shots, and then we get a trailer.
Yeah.
And then from that first trailer, we're just like, okay, let's go.
Sure.
Because the series is such a departure from Marvel tonally, structurally. It's a whole new ballpark as far as like live action media that they haven't really gone into. And they just, I mean, obviously we're here doing the show, so clearly they hit it out of the park. And it's like a completely different side of that Marvel Cinematic Universe that we are not accustomed to seeing, and they pull it off spectacularly.
Well, because it doesn't deal with those big galactic global threats. I mean, Daredevil it takes place in a neighborhood, like, you know.
Yeah, when you need someone to fight the Chitauri, as much as we love them, you don't call Matt. You don't call Daredevil. You call Thor. You call Iron Man. You call Hulk.
Right.
But yeah, it just, I remember I had like a party in my house for the premiere.
I was there.
And you and Jen came, and Mike Hoffer was there, and everyone else kind of like wasn't really like big comic fans, but they were just kind of coming for a fun time.
But I felt even us fans, we were a little on edge because we didn't know.
We didn't know what to expect.
Could be good. They could drop the ball.
Yeah,
we didn't know.
That first episode ended, and the three of us just kind of looked at each other like, oh crap.
Yep.
This is a game changer.
This is Daredevil.
This is legitimately Daredevil. There's like, obviously there are little things you can nitpick here and there that we'll get into throughout the different episodes, but it's one of the most faithful adaptations of a character in a live action format that we've ever seen.
Yeah. Now you can get into, like you said, nitpicking details about like its faithfulness, and well, technically, you know, this didn't really happen until this particular point in the 1980s, and
you got to swap some things.
What you have to understand is the tone and the characters and the beats are just dead.
Okay, so the first episode is called Into the Ring. Now, a lot of times, as we've seen with comic book films, a lot of things, one thing that fans kind of tend to bemoan is the origin story. Just because there are so many origin stories and retelling of origin stories that we're familiar with, you can make an easy argument that most people are not familiar with Daredevil's origin. And what they do in this first episode, when you would think that they would maybe carry out the origin over 1 or 2 full episodes, they tackle the origin very quickly. They get it quick to the point and out of the way pretty quickly.
Yeah, like in the first 5 minutes of the episode. Well, the powers anyway.
Yeah.
The blindness.
Yeah, how he got the powers. Obviously, for those of you who do know, Matt Murdock, walking as a small kid, walking down the street, sees a guy crossing the street and a truck carrying toxic chemicals is not going to stop for him. So Matt pushes the guy out of the way. The truck swerves and spills radioactive chemicals into his face. Very 1960s Marvel origin, back when we didn't know what radioactivity did or did not do. This is how Matt got his powers, through radioactive goop.
And all that information you just relayed, Marvel relays in this show in 5 minutes.
They do.
It's pretty great.
It's really good. It's efficient, and it's completely understandable.
Oh, and then we get our first glimpse of the... Nope, not yet. Sorry.
Yeah,
my bad. The opening credits didn't start yet.
No, the opening credits are a little later in the show. we get our first introduction to Matt Murdock in the show. What I like about what they did here is they introduce Matt not as a vigilante, not as a lawyer, but they introduce him as a Catholic.
Big character trait of good old Matt.
Yeah, it's something that always kind of attracted me to the character. I claim a faith of my own, and this is one thing that really drew me to the character, is that he is, I wouldn't go so far as to say devout Catholic, but he's definitely practicing.
He practices as a recovering Catholic. I will tell you, it's not necessarily something that endears me to him, but I understand.
Yeah.
So a lot of his tendencies and his guilt.
Yeah.
Oh, his guilt. Very deep seated.
The Catholic guilt is very real.
Very, very real.
What I love about the scene, he's in the confessional booth. Rewatching this scene, I was reminded how touching it is. And on another level that I can relate to the character is that how he talks about his father. And this is a character who lost his father much sooner than he should have.
Sure.
For those of you who know, I lost my father 6 years ago. 7 years ago almost. No, 6 years ago. Yeah. And it was obviously earlier than it should have happened. And this scene was particularly very touching, at least for me on an emotional level.
Yeah, like that aspect of the character has always been important. Obviously, it's like if his origin has two components, part one is the radioactive waste. Part two is his father getting killed.
Yeah.
Well, part two is his father in general, but the getting killed part especially.
Yeah. And little side trivia note to lighten the mood a little bit. The origin of Daredevil is actually the origin of another famous comic book title.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of Heroes in the Half Shell.
Yeah, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
The creators of the Ninja Turtles, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, used the origin of Daredevil to spin into the origin of the Ninja Turtles, because what they wink hinted at was that the radioactive materials, the toxic materials that spilled out of the truck, spilled down into the sewer and found the Turtles and Splinter and mutated them. And then there's obviously parodies between the Foot Clan, who the Turtles fight against, and then
the Hand.
The organization of the Hand.
Yeah.
So, and yet there's never been a comic book crossover of these two, which I don't understand. That's a no.
There kind of should be. There really should be. Someday, maybe.
I mean, come on. Ninja Turtles and Daredevil caught between a feud between the Foot and the Hand. The story writes itself.
It really does. That'd be fun.
So, we're coming up now. And
after that scene with this is where it kind of gets serious, because now we get Turk, which was kind of, again, all these characters from Daredevil's, like even the bit players get a little chance to shine. So Turk, in case you don't know, he's a goon. He's a Hell's Kitchen goon.
He's a goon with personality that gets to stay around.
Right.
He was introduced primarily, I believe, in Frank Miller's run.
I'm not sure when he was introduced, but I know Miller used him. And then in Bendis' run, he gets used a lot. And in Bendis' run, Turk gets to run things for a little while.
Oh, God.
And he screws up colossally.
Yeah.
But it's still cool.
So we've got the scene here. Turk is smuggling women into, obviously, illegal sex trade. And we have our second introduction to Matt, this time as Daredevil. But
right.
He doesn't...
Proto-Daredevil, kind of.
Yeah, proto. He doesn't have the name. He doesn't have the costume that we are accustomed to.
No, in this costume, the black outfit, the long sleeve shirt and the bandana and all that, that's all taken from Frank Miller's The Man Without Fear run with John Romita Jr., which was like a landmark. I think Marvel was trying to they were trying to cash in, I guess, on The Dark Knight Returns at the time, and
I think they were trying to cash in on Batman Year One more.
Maybe a little more Year One. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Origin, Man Without Fear is a more in-depth origin story of Daredevil, and that's what this season takes a lot of its beats from, and we're definitely going to review that comic in a later show. Now, we see a first example of the fight choreography here in the show, where Matt is just plowing through these guys. And what I notice about these fight choreographies is that it's not like your traditional movie fight choreography.
No, it's a little more savage.
It's efficient. It's brutal. It's what you imagine if this were to happen in some sort of situation. This is how fighting would happen. It kind of takes its beats from the earlier parts of the Nolan Batman trilogy, in the fighting, just showing just very.
But except I can see what's happening in these.
Yes, that's true. Cinematography
it's not super zoomed in shaky cam.
Yeah. Now something happens in this fight that to me was kind of a wink from the filmmakers, from the showrunners, saying, we know what you want.
Oh, the little baton action?
Here's a little taste. Don't worry, we're going to get there, but you're going to have to wait for it a little bit.
Well, he throws the baton, and you get some ricochet effect going on. Yeah, and in case you guys don't read the comics, that's a Daredevil staple move.
Yeah,
so
it's like Daredevil uses 2 billy clubs, not completely unlike Spider-Man would use his web shooters.
Correct.
And we see here they do it, and again, like I said, it's the filmmakers kind of winking to us saying, be patient, we're going to get there, but you're going to like the ride.
Right.
So shortly after this initial fight scene, we, as we mentioned earlier, are treated to what I think is a lost art form in a lot of television nowadays, which is the intro.
Intro credits.
The intro credits, like...
You don't get a full-on Full House sequence here, with all the cast, but you do get a really cool... I don't know. The music, I think, is good. It's got a nice little theme.
The music is fantastic. The effect of the red paint just kind of flowing down.
Is it paint or I was always not for nothing, but when I saw it for the first time, I was like, "Wow, that's kind of graphic for Marvel."
We watching Daredevil or we watching True Blood here? What do we watch?
Pretty serious, I thought.
So, but it's just kind of shows in a way, illustrates in some ways how his powers work, as things just kind of cover, but there's like hollow on the inside.
I never thought about that.
There's so many things you can derive from this. It's just such a beautiful sequence, and it's one of those things that I don't like. A lot of times when you're watching a Netflix show or you're rewatching something, you kind of skip something. I rarely ever skip this, just because it's actually I believe it won a couple awards.
I like the tune too. I'm sorry, man. I like that song. Nice. I like that song.
It's subtle.
Yep.
It conveys the seriousness of the show. And
it's got just enough of a hero beat to it without being too grandiose.
It really does. So after the intro, we are introduced to Matt's partner in crime, Foggy.
Foggy. Now, okay, so we got to get this out of the way. A lot of people I know that have watched this show, one of their big hang-ups is Foggy because his acting can be inconsistent.
I actually think in this show, they treat Foggy more seriously than they have in the comics and in any previous incarnations of the character.
He gets pretty good treatment in the Bendis and Brubaker runs, but I know where you're coming from. He's not a joke. He's not he's funny, but he's not the butt of the joke. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Franklin Nelson, aka Foggy, is the legal partner of Matt Murdock and
their college buddies.
Yeah, they're college buddies. He's more lighthearted. You can see he has a good heart, but he's also got a good business sense.
He's very pragmatic.
And he's played by the kid from Mighty Ducks.
You gotta love that.
He's played, what was his name, Fulton?
I don't remember.
Fulton Reed in Mighty Ducks?
It's been a long time.
But yeah, I think this actor does a really great job.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like, some people can't stand him. And I'm fine with him, and maybe it's just because I'm a Daredevil fan and I'm being forgiving, but I like him, and I like his I'm sorry, but the chemistry between the whole cast is fantastic, so really I buy his chemistry with Matt. It all works.
The one thing Marvel, and I would also say DC films, have done pretty solidly is casting.
Yeah, Marvel, yeah.
And DC.
Cavill, take or leave, but...
Cavill's fantastic as Superman.
Looks the part, but he's not given much to do. But
so
anyway,
Matt and Foggy are establishing Nelson and Murdoch, their law practice, and they're being shown around this law office. I'm doing air quotes because it's more or less a converted apartment. And here's where we have the connection to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because they reference the events of Avengers, the attack on New York City.
Yeah, now here's why that's important. There's a lot of reasons why this is important. Number one, to convey the connection to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is, important. But here's the thing, though, in case you don't know this or not, there is a slight divide between Marvel TV and Marvel movies.
Yes.
So
fortunate.
This is as connected as this is. It might not be as connected as we might want it to be. But in any case, it's important to establish that connection, which they do. The other reason why this is really important is because for this show to be taken seriously in the year of our Lord 2016, and for them to be in Hell's Kitchen and have it be a crime-ridden cesspool, you need some kind of disaster to explain why there is crime and why there is low property rates in Hell's Kitchen. Because right now in New York City in Hell's Kitchen, if you do not have millions of dollars, you ain't living there.
Yeah. The Hell's Kitchen, when Daredevil was created and throughout the majority of the characters run, Hell's Kitchen was not a place he wanted to live. I have a friend who lives in Staten Island, and he was just like, no, this would not be a place you would want to live.
It is. It's
past 10 years or so.
Oh my God, dude. I've been there. It's bizarre.
It's been cleaned up.
Oh, and how?
Yeah, I mean, it's good that an area like that, you no longer have to fear for your life walking down the streets at night.
Yes.
You know, what you gain, you also lose some, but that's a discussion for another time.
Oh, yeah. That's for the gentrification podcast that we'll do later.
In this scene, we also have the ideology of Matt as a lawyer and as Foggy as a lawyer defined. As we see, Matt makes the point that we are here to help people regardless of their financial stature, their stature in society. We are here to help people who need it. Whereas Foggy is 95% behind that, but he just kind of adds in, if they can pay their bills,
yes,
that would be good too.
Not for nothing, but they did a good job of that in the Fleck movie as well.
Yes,
Jon Favreau was fantastic.
He was great. He paid in Grouper.
He was so good they brought him back to direct Iron Man.
There you go.
See,
something good came out of Daredevil. Now, after a scene, we
get a Karen introduction. Essentially, we don't know it necessarily at first, though.
Exactly, we're introduced to Karen in a vastly different way than we were introduced to Karen in 1964. Back in 1964, Karen Page is a carbon copy female. Not necessarily like sidekick, but female character.
Sure.
She's a receptionist at Nelson and Murdoch. There's not a lot to her. Here we're introduced to her. She is standing over a corpse, shaking with a bloody knife in her hand, and everything is telling us she has just murdered this guy.
Right.
We cut to Karen in the police custody.
And who defends her, but...
Who happens to show up in Nelson and Murdoch.
Of course.
Because Foggy has his friend on the force who tips him off to the case because they're looking to get clients. There's this meeting scene where Foggy and Matt meet Karen, and she describes what happened, and we get a first real inkling into Matt's abilities.
Yep. The heartbeat. He hears her heartbeat.
Daredevil has... I'm surprised this is just now that we're touching on this. Daredevil's abilities are super enhanced senses. So, like, he can hear Karen's heartbeat and tell if she is lying or not, which is why he can tell in this particular instance she is telling the truth. Now, this shows another way that this show differentiates itself from other superhero shows and films, because in other comic book / superhero shows and films, powers are very defined, black and white. You know what the character can and can't do.
They kind of pace this one out a little bit. You get glimpses of Matt's ability. They kind of just ask you to put it together for yourself in a way.
Exactly. So, and I think in a way this is doing the viewer a service because it's treating the viewer like an intelligent viewer.
Yeah.
And not just explaining it to them on a flow chart.
Sure. And then, we get... The show really sets a lot of stuff up in the first episode.
It really does.
So then you get the introduction to, not so much to the main villain, but his reach. Wesley, who, spoilers, he works for the Kingpin.
Yes. Based predominantly on the character The Arranger from the comic books. The Arranger was around when Kingpin was predominantly a Spider-Man villain. And he was kind of, that finger on the nose. That was his name. He arranged things for the Kingpin.
Yep.
Meetings, things like that. Assassinations, yada, yada.
Well, here he is telling a guy to kill Karen Page in her jail cell.
No, that's not this. This is just establishing the reach of Fisk. Because this guy just owes debt, and they bought his debt.
Right, but he's going to do them a
Yeah,
favor
he'll
later.
come back
Yeah,
later.
yeah, yeah.
But right now,
Spoilers, sorry.
Yeah, they're just kind of establishing the threat right now. I like this character of Wesley. He is sinister and creepy while conveying pleasantness and politeness. So
Those are the guys you got to watch out for.
exactly, and he's just very businesslike about it.
Spoilers, guys. I have dogs, so if you're going to listen to the show with any sort of regularity, you might hear any number of dogs barking in the background. So,
But we like the dogs. They add the dogs are the characters of the show.
one of my dogs is named after Matt Murdock's brief wife, just so you know, in case you didn't know that.
I did not know that.
Yeah, Mila is named after Mila Donovan, who was Matt's wife in the Bendis series. Unfortunately, she doesn't meet a very pleasant end.
As does most of
I mean, she lives,
Matt's
but
decisions.
it's still not good. So a lot of our episode from there is kind of built around Karen and her case, and is she innocent? Is she guilty? What happened? What are the circumstances around what she did? Well, what you kind of come to realize is that she's kind of part of a bigger picture. She's part of a bigger scheme, one of the Kingpin schemes, but that gets kind of slowly relayed. But again, This episode sets up a lot of information up front.
Yeah, season premieres are always about asking questions, whereas season finales are always about answering questions.
Right.
So we have a lot of questions here asked. We get to see how Nelson and Murdoch work as a law firm. There is predominantly more in this episode Nelson and Murdoch as a law firm than we see Matt as Daredevil.
Yeah. Which I think set the pace for the show in a way, because you knew it wasn't just going to be rooftop beatdowns. You were going to get the full character of Matt Murdoch, Franklin Nelson, Karen Page. They laid a lot of groundwork, and you got a sense of tone and pace. And as a first episode, that's great. They could have just said, we're going to give you all money shots to hook you. But I think the fact that they're on Netflix, they knew they didn't have to worry so much about that, because on Netflix, you get 10 episodes at once, and it's just I'm just going to watch the next one anyway. You don't got to wait a week and be like, that last one was kind of so when Sunday night rolls around, you could take or leave.
They tell the story more like you would. They tell the story of the season more like you would in a book rather than like a film or a television show, because they just have so much more time to work with, and they're not really constrained by typical network television restrictions, things like that.
So they try to kill Karen in her cell.
Yes.
And they fail.
We establish here that Karen is not your typical damsel in distress.
No, she can take care of herself.
Yeah, Karen is a fighter. What do you think? How do you think they did with Karen Page?
Good.
As far as now that we're 2 seasons in this show,
I don't want to spoil the.
Obviously, no, we're not going to spoil anything that may or may not happen in the future. But we obviously love Charlie Cox's Daredevil. We love Foggy. We love Vince D'Onofrio as Fisk.
You're asking, do we love Karen?
Do we love Karen?
Yeah, I like Karen. They did good. Because like you said, in the comics, here's the thing. It's not just, you can't just cast Karen in one way. So when she was introduced in the comics, she was a very one-dimensional, damsel, right? Yeah. Well, that changes big time in the Frank Miller run. And, more so later on, she has a lot of ups and downs in her arc, okay?
Yeah, talking about Karen is going to be hard to do, because a lot of stuff that defines Karen has not happened yet in the show,
right.
Though it's been hinted at.
There are hints, and that's okay. So that's why I think they cast her really well, because she is not a goody two. She can play good, but there's something behind it, and she conveys that pretty well. And I don't know. I think everyone is cast exceptionally well in this show. No one's really out of place.
So Karen tries to get killed in the cell. It fails.
Well, she tries.
Yeah, they try to kill her. Yeah, they try to kill her in the cell. It fails. So this having failed, the police have to immediately release her.
Right. And where does she stay?
Yeah, exactly.
So spoilers, folks. I'm going to let you in on a little secret from a longtime Daredevil fan. Another one of Daredevil's defining traits, on top of being blind and having super senses, and
he's a himbo.
Oh, dude, Daredevil gets around, son.
He works the blind thing.
Oh, like a champ. And I think they even said it like in the show, like they're always banging, and Foggy's just like, how do you know they're hot? How do you always know they're hot?
Yeah, exactly.
Because he knows.
He knows. He's got the senses.
Working the angles.
So Karen goes to stay with Matt. Now there's this flash drive that has this specific information to Union Ally.
I just realized that Marvel shows have an obsession with thumb drives. They come back around again in Jessica Jones as well.
Jessica Jones, Winter Soldier.
Winter Soldier. Oh my God, you're right.
Oh geez. Peeling away layers of the Marvel universe here on Devil's
It's all about thumb drives.
Thumb drives everywhere. So
you can stop Thanos with a thumb drive, theoretically.
So there's this thumb drive that has all this information for Union Allied, which is essentially a front for the
front
mob.
company, mob. Yeah.
So Karen has it. She doesn't want Matt and Foggy to know she has it because she doesn't want them to get hurt. But obviously, we see again Daredevil using his abilities, can tell that Karen is lying.
Right.
Now, in between this and what becomes the climax of the first episode, we meet the crime families.
Yeah, we do. And now here's another bit of friggin' inspired casting. The guy who plays Owlsley, the owl. Well, it's vague if he's the owl or the owl's father in this show. You can kind of read it either way, because obviously he's not like the owl like in the comics
with the Wolverine hair and the Wolverine claws.
Exactly, but like the warden from Shawshank is the owl, and it's great.
He physically kind of looks like an owl.
I know.
He's got that nose, that curved down nose.
It's great.
Looks like an owl's beak.
It's fantastic.
So Leland Owlsley, we meet him.
Madame Gao, the Chinese, head of the Chinese. You get some Russians in here, then the Japanese show up,
and we meet Nobu. Who is going to have a major part to play coming up. As if you've watched show, you know. If you're watching show with us, you're gonna love. Trust us.
Yeah. Then Wesley shows up, and now you kind of see that. Okay, Wesley, who again works for the Kingpin, who we have not met yet, and you spoilers, you're not going to meet for a little while on the show.
Yeah, not until I think episode 4.
Yeah.
But here's the genius thing they do with Fisk, the Kingpin. They establish him as a threat to be feared, without ever showing him on screen or giving him a single line dialogue in this episode.
Yeah.
Simply by not allowing his co-workers, if you will, to speak his name.
Yep.
Because to speak his name makes him human. And the desired effect is that he is beyond something like that, something that you fear so much that you will not even speak his name.
Which is funny, because when we do meet him, he's very, very human.
He is. And
like fragilely human.
A friend of mine had a real problem with how Kingpin was portrayed on the show, because he felt that...
We'll get into that when
he felt that it
comes.
wasn't threatening enough.
Oh, I don't know.
Just as much an origin story for Kingpin as it is for Daredevil.
Very much.
But I think I like the dynamic that they do between the crime families. You could see that there's cooperation, but not necessarily trust. So,
yeah, we meet the players, and they all come into play later on. That's the beauty of the TV show is that you have so many episodes to like dive into depth, and we do get to meet like Daredevil's dealings with all these different crime families, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, which this brings us to kind of the climactic scene of this first episode, whereas Karen goes back to her apartment to fetch the aforementioned thumb drive.
But someone's waiting for her.
Someone is waiting, of course, to kill her, and then, of course, Matt shows up to save her.
Yep.
Now, they could simply do, hero shows up, saves the girl, beats up the bad guy. But we get another example of the great fight choreography, which is very brutal.
Yep.
We get an example of that Matt is still somewhat new to this because he doesn't dominate the fight by any stretch of the imagination.
He gets knocked on his ass, and then it gets put down for a minute.
Yeah, what I like about the scene is the flashback.
Sure.
And we get the father talking to the son after Matt's father, who is a boxer,
Yep.
Batlin Jack Murdoch. Very important, the pronunciation. It's not battling, it's Batlin.
Yep, correct.
Jack Murdoch. Batlin Jack is not a successful boxer.
No.
By any stretch of the imagination.
He's I don't know if I'd call him a full-on jobber in wrestling parlance, but he's not exactly lighting the world on fire.
Yeah, he's not by any means undefeated, but he's not also winless.
Correct.
They established that he is good enough to make somewhat of a living at it, and we have this very touching scene between him and Matt where he's just talking to Matt, saying that, you got to do your homework, do your studies, don't end up like me. And it's just like the key phrase you take out of the scene is "get up, Matt."
Yep.
And they use that as Matt remembers it when we flash back forward to the present. He's lying in the rain, and we have that iconic shot that we saw in the early trailers that really led us to believe they were doing the show well, with him slowly rising up out of the water, blood dripping down from his lips. And then, of course, Matt goes on to win the fight. Karen is exonerated of the murder. And then at the end of the episode, we get a little nod to The Godfather, because Fisk goes about settling family business. The guard that tried to kill Karen in the cell and failed is dealt with. A couple other people are dealt with, and this is all happening in a pleasant car ride conversation, Fisk over the phone with Wesley.
We also get the beginnings of the partnership, or the trios, if you will, if you're into wrestling. You get Nelson, Murdoch, and Karen, who cannot afford to pay them. She decides to become their secretary. She's going to work it off.
Yeah, and it's I have here in my notes, this scene I simply just summed up, Nelson and Murdoch, exclamation point.
Yep.
Because this is like the first time we see the full team of Nelson and Murdoch. And then as the outro to the show, it sets up the next episode.
We get a montage. So Matt goes to the gym.
The gym where his father trained, the gym where he spent a lot of time.
And that's, if you're a comics fan, by the way, there are some Easter eggs in here for you.
There are tons at Crusher Hogan.
Crusher Creel.
No, was it? Oh, no, Crusher Hogan was the guy who wrestled Spider-Man.
That's correct.
Yeah. Crusher Creel was Absorbing Man?
Well, hang on. In the comics, Crusher Hogan. In the movie, Bonesaw.
Bonesaw is ready!
Played by the late Macho Man Randy Savage. But yeah, Crusher Creel, man. That's the Absorbing Man in the comics.
And that is the first of many, many small Easter eggs.
Oh, wait till we get to Gladiator.
Jeez. So great. So great.
But yeah, so Matt's hitting the punching bag, and we get these little intercuts of our villains and their craziness. Oh yeah, there's the cop who tried to kill Karen.
Yeah,
his daughter finds him. Oh,
that's sad.
Yeah.
So, but then we have the setup for the next episode in which the kid gets kidnapped, and we see Matt.
Well, that's key.
That is very key.
That's very key.
We see Matt on the rooftop, the classic hero pose on the rooftop.
Not the superhero landing pose. Very important.
Not superhero landing pose because it's bad in knees.
That's right.
You didn't even watch that movie.
I didn't, but I know that's a thing.
You've got to watch it. It's so good.
One of these years.
One of these days, sir.
Yeah, maybe.
We see Madame Gao's heroin trade run by all blind people. We're going to, when it gets to the end of the first season, we're going to have some serious discussions on Madame Gao, because there is a certain emblem that's being stamped on these heroin packages.
Oh, yeah.
That is going to lead to something coming up in the future.
We'll get to all that. Don't worry. So, like you said, though, the Russians kidnap the kid. They throw him in the van, and Matt gets up on the rooftop, and the hero pose, like you said, and that's where we leave this episode. And that leads us into episode 2, which you're going to have to wait until the next episode of this podcast for us to dive into that. But we will. Oh. We might even have to live count. I don't know. We'll
that one I want to discuss, because
can we watch the last part of it at least?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, cool.
We can do it.
Cool.
We can do it.
So yeah, man, that's the first episode of Daredevil, and like in summation, like it sets up everything brilliantly. I mean, very tight. You get a sense of the world that Matt lives in. You get a sense of the characters. And as a fan, I will say it, man, over and over, damn, they did it right. They really did it so right. And it could have went so wrong.
It really could have. If you've read the comics and you're familiar with the character, like I said, that moment we were all in my place, you, me, and Hoffer just looked at each other like, wow.
Yeah. Did I stay for the second episode?
Yes.
No. Did I?
Yeah, you did.
Okay, because that's when we really were like, we were all looking at each other just like, what just happened? What just happened?
I am not ashamed to admit it. I'll be the first one to say that when it comes to like movies and things like that, I'm an easy cry.
Oh,
I was wiping away tears at the ending of that second episode.
I think I was just like that. I had goosebumps, but again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. So that's our episode recap.
That's our first
Daredevil.
episode.
That's our first episode of the podcast.
Episode, the Devil's Due.
Look at that
episode.
Someone out there is like, so is this all they're going to do? Is like talk about how great it is?
Yeah, we're gonna do our things.
Well, that's kind of the point.
Like comic reviews. We're gonna let Drew kind of stretch his legs in different areas.
Ooh,
you never know what's going to pop up on this.
What am I doing?
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
Oh no.
Well, you like to cook and whatnot.
I do like to cook, and I do like to brew beer. Devil's Due. What rhymes with Due? Well, you'll see.
Like it's set in Hell's Kitchen. Oh, the possibilities. But in the meantime, again, like we mentioned in the beginning of the show, if you want, you can follow us on Twitter at Devil's Due Pod. You can find us on Facebook. You can search The Devil's Due or facebook.com. I believe it's / Devil's Due Pod. Usually it's easiest just
the slash. You'll find it.
Do the search, The Devil's Due.
There you go.
Follow us on those. You can email us at devilsdue@gmail.com. I think it might actually be Devil's Due Pod. I should probably know that for the next episode.
It's not going to matter.
It's
Trust me.
It's email. So, yeah, you can also follow myself on Twitter. I am Carl Duty. My tag is at The Real Big Duty. See, it's a multiple meanings.
It's play on words.
Because I'm a large man, and my last name is Duty.
I got you.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
You are not on Twitter, are you?
I lurk.
You
don't. Yeah, you don't want to follow me.
You
can follow my band though if you want. And
yes, you are the front man for the premier heavy metal band in Buffalo, New York.
Premier
Long Cold Dark.
The Long Cold Dark. And for you comics fans who your spider senses might be tingling, yes, I got the name from a Punisher comic arc. Garth Ennis Max run. No, that's not a damn thing wrong with that. So yeah, if you want to follow that, that's a place where I lurk on Twitter.
And your guys' latest album just dropped last month?
The end of April, actually.
All right, so that would be 2 months ago then.
Something like that. Okay. I don't know.
But you can find that on iTunes,
Amazon MP3, Spotify, anywhere, CD Baby. I prefer you go to our official store, which is the longcolddark.bigcartel.com. Because if you buy it from us there, we actually get all the money for it, as opposed to iTunes, which takes like 30% right off the top. So, but hey, I don't really care, to be honest with you. This is not a money-making enterprise. So if you want to check that out, I would be more than happy to have you check it out.
I mean, we could talk Drew into being a little more frequent on Twitter, communicating with the people.
I'll
give him the password and the
I'm a good lurker.
The Devil's Due Twitter handle, and
I take in the information. I don't necessarily have to wade in the pool.
Yeah. We definitely want to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show. If you got any suggestions for stuff that you'd like to see us do, we're going to be doing, like we mentioned, some comic reviews. We'll be doing some like geek culture news here and there, things like that, big stories we're going to talk about. Like when a new Marvel film comes out, or like pretty much most comic
We'll talk
films.
About the big stuff.
We'll give you a review. But yeah.
Yeah. First episode.
In the bag.
We'll have to, work out some kinks and whatnot, but yeah, that's pretty good.
We got to think of a clever thing to say for, the
ending?
Outro. The ending.
Damn. I got nothing. Fair enough. Well, Carl, it's been fun.
It's been awesome. And we will see you listeners, or talk to you listeners, next week.
Next week. Probably.